We sent out the cans. I got a call from one of the businesses that we'd sent the cans to, and they said, your water tastes a bit weird. We basically drove at like 100 miles per hour to go to the warehouse to taste this water. After probably sitting on the cans crying for an hour about how we're going to get through this, it's examples like that where you get through it.
Trials, tribulations, mistakes, barriers, successes and failures. Hear it here firsthand from those that have grown billion-dollar businesses to those that are just starting out. Winner of the Campaign Publishing Award for Best Business Podcast in the UK, Success is in the Mind is the only place where you can get a sense of business reality in a world full of idealism. Everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but can everyone live up to the title? What does it take to start a business, to get your product into a high street store or grow a well-managed team? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself. Join me as I interview business leaders and founders from across the globe, delving into what makes them tick, their differentiators and intrinsic motivators. This is Success is in the Mind. Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. Josh White, co-founder of CanO Water, marketing director and Forbes 30 Under 30 alumni. CanO Water is the world's answer to recyclable single-use plastic bottles, a brand founded in 2015 in response to the damaging impact that plastic bottles are having on the environment. CanO Water has sold over 15 million cans in the UK and Ireland alone. Prior to starting CanO Water, Josh travelled the world as a DJ. His eureka moment when Josh and his mates went to Thailand and witnessed the severity of plastic pollution firsthand. Now with a recent 7-figure investment and the former European president of Heineken joining the team as a non-executive chairman, I asked Josh what pushback he received in the early stages, why hasn't canning water been done before, and when will CanO Water be sold internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh White. So looking back, I suppose, before we actually get into this, I just wanted to kind of look at the Sidemen Guess the Millionaire game that you went on YouTube. You know, 5-star rating for acting there. You were the original Richard Mill, and that's not even your name. How did you get onto that?
It was a very random one. I got a message from someone that works with the Sidemen on Facebook. They were looking for people that were, I guess, fake millionaires and found me. They found me on the Forbes 30 Under 30. I've actually grown up watching those guys, so it actually felt like something that would have been quite fun. And I guess I was just sort of being myself, really.
Because you were there, they were trying to figure out if you were this individual that was a millionaire at the time, and the answer to that was no. But the chap that was evicted quite early on in the programme from memory. Yeah,
it was funny because I actually clocked on earlier who was the millionaire because we weren't actually meant to know. And I actually was in the toilet with him and he was putting on a real Richard Mill. So I knew at that point that this guy was serious. My Richard Mill wasn't real.
It was good. I liked it. But looking at actually what you guys are doing, you went on there because you're under Forbes 30 Under 30. You've got a business called CanO Water. You've got 3 founders, yourself included. Talk to me about where CanO Water came from.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a strange idea, really. And it came completely at random. We are 3 good friends who went on a trip to Thailand together and came across huge amounts of plastic pollution of brands that we grew up loving. And we grew up around, Hertfordshire, Watford area. And around there, you don't see a lot of big plastic pollution. You might see a bit of a plastic bottle here or a can sort of littered there, but you don't see a lot of pollution anywhere. And we were shocked, to be honest with you. And I think most people would just see something like this and just get over it and get on with their holiday. But we sort of became completely and utterly obsessed with why is this happening? How is it happening? And how can we do something about it? And coming back, we did a lot of research about packaging and saw that aluminium actually is the most recyclable material on the planet. So when you recycle a can, it will just come back as a can and it can be recycled again and again and again. So the Coke can or the Red Bull can or the CanO Water can that you would have drank from could have been hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cans before. So we sort of thought, why has no one ever put water in a can? And we thought, why not? We're going to be the first people in the world to put water in a can.
It is an innovative idea, and I was baffled when I looked at it that actually no one else has done it before, because it makes absolute sense. But your previous life, before you went into the world of essentially CanO watering, if that is even a thing, you were a DJ. You were travelling around Europe. You were DJing at gigs, and then you kind of decided to throw the towel in and go into the world of entrepreneurialism. Had you always had a flair for business?
I've always wanted to do more. DJing for me was a hobby. I'm madly obsessed with music. So DJing has been something that, you know, I started at 11 years old. My dad bought me my first pair of decks when I was 11. I just became completely and utterly obsessed of just mixing music together. And but it was never ever something that I wanted to do forever. You know, it was something that it was a hobby. I needed to do it because I absolutely loved music. I loved, you know, sometimes I'll be DJing to over a few 100,000 people a week all over the country and all over Europe at times. But I definitely felt like I yearned for something else. And I always had passion for doing good, whether it be mental health or just something that could help people. So CanO Water, when it happened, and I always say this, that 99% of people would have come up with that idea and just thought it was stupid and then just forgotten about it. But I think for us, it was like, no, we're actually going to do this because actually it could make a difference.
I mean, looking at the idea, you're right, because I introduced you by saying, you know, well, you laughed out the room when you went to manufacturers and went, look, guys, I know you've been bottling water for the last 10 years, but can you bung it in a can instead? Did you get individuals say, actually, this is a stupid idea. We don't want to manufacture it. We don't want to get involved?
The first 3 years was basically just, it was horrible because people just didn't believe in it. We were lucky. We got into Selfridges. We did London Fashion Week. You know, we left our jobs because, you know, we thought, wow, this is it. We're onto something. But when sort of push comes to shove and you start making the calls and you're like, you know, we've got this CanO Water, people they don't get it. They just don't get it. And at that time, no one within food and drink was talking about plastic pollution. You know, no one cared. I sat down with my business partner, with one of the owners of one of the biggest drinks companies in the country, who basically laughed us out the room. He said, plastic pollution is not that bad. You've got a good product. It looks good, but it will never get into Tesco. You may as well just go back to your day jobs. And that was a pattern for 3 years of people just not thinking that cans were going to be a thing. We were very fortunate, you know, that obviously Sky, BBC, David Attenborough, all these sort of things were happening around the same time that we were planting this seed. But people really, really didn't warm to the idea of canned water, especially within, you know, not really the consumer, because the consumer actually wanted change. But in the industry, people, you know, plastic's cheap, so people wanted to protect that.
It was almost just too much admin to change, I suppose, so people just didn't want to didn't want to bother. But those 3 years of you consistently being knocked back, how did you keep going? Because obviously I'm assuming you were still DJing, or were you full-time in CanO Water at that point?
I was still DJing. You know, I still DJ a little bit now. As I said, I've still got that obsession where I love it. But we were just ticking along, to be honest with you. We were literally, we were so naive. And that's the funny thing about this, is that a lot of people within the industry have said that if we were in the drinks industry, we probably wouldn't have succeeded, because we would have got to a point where so many people would have told us that it wasn't a thing and we just would have stopped. But we were so adamant that we were going to make this work, and we were so confident that it's a better solution, that I mean, this whole story is all about authenticity and passion and, you know, not taking no for an answer. I mean, even getting a can of water was difficult. We had to get a minimum run of 150,000 for still and 150,000 for sparkling. You know, we couldn't afford that. You know, we had to jump over hurdles and troubleshoot and work out ways of how we're going to do this, because most people told us that putting water in a can is impossible.
And in terms, because you're two founders or co-founders, I suppose, you've got Perry, you've got Ariel. In terms of what their backgrounds are, they aren't exactly manufacturing experts. They've never been in business really before from an entrepreneurial point of view. How did they kind of jump ship? Because one of them was an FX trader, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, so Ariel was in FX and did some recruitment. I think that, do you know what it was? I think that we all, and that's one thing, the three of us really stood by each other, and we were sort of there for each other in the early days. You know, one might get knocked back because we were working on something and then, you know, we lost it. And the other two sort of came to that person's needs and sort of cared for them when things weren't going their way. And I think that was quite important in the early days because, you know, it is just the three of us. It is a massive leap. All of our friends are, you know, doing the standard. They've got their standard jobs and they're out there and they're making money. You know, we were really doing this based on, you know, as I said, passion and authenticity. We weren't reaping any rewards whatsoever. We were just passionate about building something that could potentially change the way that we drink water. But I guess that defying the norm side really excited us, you know, going against the grain and really breaking the mold. It's sort of, every time someone said no to us, it was like, well, no, we will make this happen. And I think that really spurred us on and gave us that push and that encouragement to actually, you know, strive to make it happen.
Yeah, because I mean, how much did it cost to get it off the ground? Because it can't have been a cheap concept to launch.
No, I mean, listen, it costs tens of thousands to really create any product, really, because, you know, there's minimum orders and, you know, you need to look at trademarking and this and that. And as I said, we were very naive. So, you know, we went into this thinking, yeah, we'll make this happen. And then you get to a barrier and it's like, oh, okay, how do we get over this? And the three of us would work it out. And I think that's something that I learned about business, and what's made me a much better entrepreneur or operator is that things happen every single day that you need to troubleshoot and overcome. And it's you that needs to come up with that way around it. There's no one else that's going to do it for you or help you. And I think that it's sort of like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type of mentality, is that every time I've got over a hurdle, it's made me a better person. So for the next hurdle, I'm ready. And I think that that's something that in 6 years of building CanO Water, if I look at the person I was then to the person I am now, you know, I can get through anything just because the way that my mind works, I've built up this thought process that just works in a different way than it did before.
I'm assuming you guys had pooled together some of your cash to be able to afford this, or did you go for seed fund initially?
To be honest with you, we were just scraping in money. Like we didn't have anything like that at all. You know, we didn't have family. You know, we didn't take anything from family. We were basically doing it ourselves. You know, I had a bit of DJ money and the other two had a bit of money. And our plan was, let's build a fake brand that basically doesn't exist with no product, because we couldn't get water in a can, because the prototype that we needed to get 150,000 of each. So 300,000 to try still and sparkling water in a can. We couldn't afford that.
That's a lot.
It's crazy. So we basically created, and luckily we had Perry, who's, you know, a fantastic, you know, designer. And we after work, we had full-time jobs. After work, we would meet up and we would create this brand, CanO Water, which was the most beautiful can of water, but it was only on paper. You know, it didn't exist. It didn't exist as a product. And the idea was, let's create something that looks so good that we can basically sell it without, you know, having any product. So we went, you know, we emailed Selfridges and London Fashion Week with this brochure, and they came back within like 3 weeks because they loved it. And we turned up to meetings with prototypes that we had created in my family's like playroom, basically.
But in terms of, you know, when you were constantly being pushed back and you were creating this visually pleasing brand, and I have to say it genuinely looks excellent. It's kind of got that user interface like it does on Apple when you're looking to buy one of their Macs. It's genuinely pretty. But how did you kind of get past that consistent barrier kind of being put up when you didn't have any money? Individuals were saying, no, we're not interested. You could have just so easily given up. Were you being driven because you thought it was for the greater good, or were you genuinely being driven because you thought there'd be a good payday at the end of it?
I think that, listen, money is something that I think that if you work really hard, you know, it will come. But that was never, you know, I was 22 years old when we came up with the idea, and 23 when CanO Water started. I'd never made money before. You know, I'd never made money before. This was something that the three of us were so passionate about. One, because it was so cool, really, really, really cool. And two, because it served a purpose. And I think that, as I said to you, I know loads of people that come up with ideas, and after 2 years, if it's not working, they're back to their job. And that's the reality. That is the reality. It is not easy to build a business. So 3.5 years of basically being turned away 80-90% of the time. If it was just about money, then, I think that we would have just given up. But this really was, we've got to make this work. We've got to make this work. And, when we got back from Thailand and we started to see things that were going on in Bali and Mumbai and all these other places, we actually saw that this problem is so bad and no one was talking about it. So as soon as Sky and BBC and all these other guys were talking about it, it was like, all right, these guys are on the journey with us, and, we could work quite closely with them.
I mean, in terms of looking at it now, taking the snapshot currently, you're in 10,000 stores nationwide. You've sold, since your founding, 15 million cans. Do you go back to those initial shops or those individuals that said it's not going to work and almost laugh at them now?
I don't go back there, but I definitely...
No, that's probably the right thing to do.
I definitely like, do you know what? I say it to a lot of people. I'll be out now and someone will be holding a can, or I'll be at an event and thousands of people will be holding cans, or someone will send me a picture, which happens most days, of, oh my God, CanO Water's here, like a friend of mine. And it still hasn't hit yet. But there have been some days like the Forbes 30 under 30 where I'll stop for a minute and I'll look back, and this whole rush of emotion will sort of take over my body of like, wow, like how did, because it goes so quick. You don't have time to stop and think. So when something like that happens, something especially that if I look at myself 10 years ago, and if you had told me that I would have had a Forbes 30 under 30, I would have laughed at you. It's those times where you stop and think, and, you say to yourself, wow, this is happening. And, we've actually created something that not just the three of us are liking, millions of people are drinking out of our product. So it's really weird, but it's always been about creating a movement for us. And it's so amazing that the consumer is really the person that's driving this, because without the consumer and without someone in the early days going into a shop and saying, I don't want plastic anymore, I don't want it, I don't want to drink out of it, so like, why have you not got alternatives like CanO Water, we wouldn't be here today.
And it's interesting because you speak about the millions of individuals that are actually drinking out of your cans. We were in a meeting quite literally yesterday, completely unprompted, and our creative director walked through the door with a can of CanO Water. He's nothing to do with the podcast. He's not in here. He didn't know you guys were coming on. And we looked at it and we were thinking, crikey, what are the chances? So you are literally everywhere. You're genuinely everywhere. You're even on Amazon. Now, how do you actually open those doors into places like Selfridges, like Amazon, like, for instance, Waitrose, when you have essentially a concept that people don't want? How do you keep banging those doors down?
I've always thought, there's two ways to look at it. First of all, no one wants to be the first and no one wants to be the last. So the people in the early days, like Selfridges and Whole Foods, these guys were pioneers because they made the decision before anyone did to bring on weird and wonderful products that were better. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to have got to the next step. But the way that I look at it, in a good analogy, is BlackBerry. Okay, we all had a BlackBerry phone. We were all obsessed with it. It was the best thing ever, and we looked at it like it was, Nokia was out the window, BlackBerry was here forever, and we were obsessed with it. And one day, our mate got an iPhone, and we looked at him like he was weird. And why has he got an iPhone? Like, that's so weird. Like, we were obsessed with BlackBerry. We're sending out BBM messages to everyone. And then more and more people started to get iPhones, and we were pressurized into getting an iPhone. And in the end, we got an iPhone. And then after day 5 of having that iPhone, we were questioning why we ever used a BlackBerry. And I think that it's making that switch, which is sort of what's happening with CanO Water. It starts with 3 people who are looked at as idiots, and then a few more people start trying it, and then a few more and a few more. And, you'll always get some people that it isn't for them, and they'll go back, but then they'll come back. And it's like that sort of toing and throwing. And I think that over time, people start to realize it's better for the planet. It's even better for your health when you compare it to, what plastic bottles can do and all these sorts of things. And once you weigh it all up, you start to see that actually this is the future, and this is the way forward. And I think that that's what's happened, in all honesty, is that the people that said no have come back to revisit it and then have said yes. And that's amazing. And we haven't even touched the surface yet. That's the craziest thing, is that we've only really just started, which is so exciting.
And the most natural synergy for going from a plastic bottle to a can would be with Coca-Cola, which we all know, simply because they also own Smart Water. Now, Smart Water is in a plastic bottle. Why have they not gone, actually, CanO Water might be onto something here, either bought you guys or just done it themselves?
First of all, they can't just turn around and say, screw plastic, can they? Because they've been polluting the planet for many years. So it would be more beneficial for them to try and come up with a way of creating a more, in quoting, recyclable plastic that basically actually doesn't work. And that's what they are doing. They're trying to create a more recyclable plastic that is made out of recycled plastic, which actually, if you think about it, doesn't really solve the problem. It's just plastic that's ended up in landfill that is now going back into plastic bottles that will end up in landfill. And I think that the answer is it's cheaper. It's cheaper to do plastic than it is cans, and that is why they're doing it. And the greatest thing about CanO Water is we've never sold a plastic bottle. We never will sell a plastic bottle. And we are a disruptive brand who can turn around and say plastic's bad, because it is, and they can't. And I think that's the main thing. But if you actually look into it, they have actually started canning water in the States, but they won't talk about it. They're very quiet about it, and they'll do it just as like a testing the market. And that's where the lack of authenticity is it's like, if you can do it, just do it. But listen, it's, at the end of the day, we don't let those things get to us. As long as they are doing the right thing, we will always be, rooting for them. I think they're a good example of someone that isn't doing the right thing. But I admire any brand that's gone from plastic bottles into cans and still not selling plastic bottles. But what we don't root for is a company that just sells cans but still sells millions of plastic bottles.
What I don't understand about the brand is that the CanO Water I get, because it's more sustainable in terms of you can recycle the aluminium. But if I were to reuse a plastic bottle multiple times, surely that's better for the planet than putting a can in the bin every day.
So there's two things to that question. First of all, convenience is enormous. We're not Greenpeace. We're not standing outside of Coca-Cola's offices with big placards saying, save the planet. We take a more realistic approach to products, and I think that convenience is something that is so important in our lives, and it's why people will choose an Uber, or people will choose a Deliveroo. It's convenience. And when we first launched a brand, one of the things that we know about plastic bottles is that you can open and close a plastic bottle, you can put it in your bag, and you can walk away with it. So people are going to want that same experience because it's convenient. So we found a resealable lid on page 10 of Google, weirdly enough.
It's a lot of scrolling.
Yeah, a lot of scrolling. And yeah, it was it really fit our needs. It was a really, really nice looking, feeling resealable lid. And we, were the first people in the UK to really bring that to the market. And if you go into Tesco or, places where it demands an on-the-go experience, you will probably find our resealable lid. But one thing I will say about reusing plastic is that it's not great to reuse plastic bottles, especially if it's got any direct light entering the bottle. It's not good. And sometimes you'll leave it in your car, or you'll leave it somewhere overnight, a plastic bottle, and it'll get murky, and it just won't look the same. And that's because, unfortunately, there are some health negatives around, and there has been sort of rumored about carcinogenics leaching into the plastic, whereas aluminium protects heat and light. So there are a lot of benefits around aluminium, and I think that we did all of this research beforehand, remember? And I think that was one of the things that we looked at and found as well, is that aluminium actually is a really, really great material. It's been around for so many years. So we didn't have science backgrounds. We couldn't just create something that just dissolved in thin air. But
that'd be good though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be amazing. But what we could do is use a material that is better than the material that we're used to, that is infinitely recyclable and doesn't pollute the planet.
Do you guys have some kind of benefit with the CanO Water, whereby it keeps the drink cooler? Does it keep it fresher? Is there anything more unique around, I suppose, using aluminium than there is using plastic?
It stays so cold. I mean, it's crazy actually. Even cans that have just not been in the fridge for 2-3 days, if they're stored in like a cool room, it will stay a lot colder than any other packaging. It's quite mad actually. I mean, yeah, it's definitely something that people always say, that water does taste a lot nicer out of a can when you've got used to it. I think that, there's nothing better than a cold CanO water. There really isn't.
You recently raised, 7 figures, and you had the ex-European president of Heineken join you guys as a non-exec chairman. That must have been a massive game changer for you guys in terms of where you can go and how you can take CanO Water to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. It's something that a lot of people sort of turned us down and didn't think that, the brand really had it or this or that in the early days. So to have someone with, and all of the investors that have come in, to have those types of individuals come in and say, oh, we're willing to invest in this with their backgrounds, especially within, the industries that they've been in, is flattering and exciting. And it really gives us that motivation and push and, strive to just do everything that we've done, but better. And I think that's the plan, really. The plan is to just keep growing, raise brand awareness and really educate people more than we've, because it's difficult when you're growing organically with, no experience, to really educate and build. And I think that that's what this really brings, is that we can take it to the next level. And if we've got this far with nothing, what can we do with this? So that's the really exciting part.
I mean, in terms of taking it this far, at what point did you get advisors, NEDs, other board members, shareholders involved in the business? Because was it just you guys for 3, 4, 5 years, or have you always had people steering and pointing you in a direction?
So we had some angel investors that were sort of guiding us, and we brought in a managing director sort of / operations manager in our sort of 3rd, 4th year. That really helped, because I think that we know that we're good brand people, but we're not, we know what we're not. So we started to bring in, resource in the areas that we needed. The team is everything. And if I look at, there's 7 of us now in the office, and, every member that sits downstairs is so important to the brand, just as important as the 3 of us, if not more important, because of what they contribute every day to the business.
At what point did you know it was the right time to bring in an MD? Because that's from an entrepreneurial startup point of view, quite difficult to go, actually, I need someone better than me to run this business right now. How do you know when to do that?
As I said before, ego isn't a thing that really plays in this office. It doesn't really. So I think that we knew, because things started to dip, or, things, we needed resource in different areas, as I said. So we knew that in year 3, 4, that we needed someone to come in and really sort of look at the business and, help us scale. I think that that's, one of the things. We are very creative, the 3 of us, and very driven, very hardworking. But sometimes you need someone to help you sort of streamline all those ideas and everything, and sort of, and this was also our first proper business. I had a business previously that failed, which actually helped me massively with my thinking.
So what was that?
So that was an event. So I ran like really large events for under 18s, where we were putting sort of 5,000-6,000 people into venues and working with some really big people within the music industry. But once again, very, very good brand head and very good creative ideas. But if I had an MD in that business, or someone to guide me like our MD had done, it would have succeeded. So I think that I definitely knew that we needed someone that had a few more grey hairs than we did who really understood that side. And I think failure for me was really important and really did me good for CanO Water. It was actually quite helpful that I had failed previously because I learned a lot and knew what not to do in certain decisions that we could have made in the early days of CanO Water.
What are those lessons?
To be completely honest with you, because I didn't have any mentors, I didn't have anyone to guide me. It was very much myself. That's what I learned. I learned that I need to bring in mentors. I need to speak to people. I need wise heads to guide me. And, if I had me now back then, it would have been a really successful business. And I think that's the greatest thing about growth, really, isn't it? Is that I'm now able to look back and think I'm that person that I needed back then. But I think failure is so important because it's so common and it should never be looked at as a negative. It actually should be looked at as a positive to enable growth and strength for the next time you go.
I think Peter Jones, I said it before in this podcast, but Peter Jones from Dragon's Den says there's no such thing as failure, only feedback, which makes absolute sense. And in terms of what strengths and weaknesses your co-founders have that, you kind of work together on, what can you not do that your other co-founders sort of bolster you on?
Well, Perry's great on Photoshop and I'm not great on Photoshop and Illustrator. I think that we complement each other massively. Whether it's being more of a people person and going out there, in the early days, I would stand in Oxford Street and talk to people and hand out cans to people. And, the others would do the same, but one might be at the office creating things and creating content, which, is something that I had no idea about. And then the other one might be really good at sales and really sort of making people sort of believe in this brand that they thought was stupid. And we all complement each other, whether it's sales, design and marketing. Even with no experience, we've got natural talents in those areas that now we excel in. But back then, because it was very new to us, never been in the food and drinks industry, we really, as I said to you, we defied the norm because we've always done things that wasn't really accepted in the food and drink world, but we just did it because why not?
Yeah. And you say you've never been in the food and drink world, but in 2019, you boys were classed in the top 100 coolest people in the Food and Drink Inside magazine. And I'm just gonna quote here that George Clooney with his tequila brand was number 9 in the top 100. You guys 52, 53, 54 respectively. How does it feel to rank in the top 100 with Mr. Clooney?
It's weird. Listen, it's weird. It's amazing. And every time something like this happens, like whether it's Bill Gates holding a can or Ellen DeGeneres or Dua Lipa or Ellie Goulding or someone, it's amazing. I don't really know how to process it. The only thing that I've got in mind is how do we do more and how do we contribute to our mission? That is everything to me. And that is really, I think that's why I'm on these things. And that's why we're on those, that's why we're gaining traction. That's why the three of us have got the Forbes 30 under 30 and all those things. It's not really because of the coolest people in the food and drink. It's to do with the fact that, we're doing something that is really cool, that has purpose at the core of it.
I mean, it's clear to see that people are picking you up left, right and centre, not just retailers, not just supermarkets, not just celebrities, but you also supply Buckingham Palace as their official on-the-go water, which I didn't even know was a thing, and the Houses of Commons you're stocked in. This is right into central government, into the heart of the UK. You're supplying the people that make the decisions. You're making a big change. Are you going to go for the Royal Seal of Approval?
I'd like to. We were the water actually once for Princess Eugenie's wedding, which was very flattering because she wanted a plastic-free wedding, which was, really nice. But yeah, listen, it's really exciting. And as I said to you before, this is only just the beginning. I think that this market, this category is absolutely enormous, and there's still shed loads of plastic bottles and loads of mixed messaging out there. So it's only really started for us, and I'm excited for, the next 6 years.
You were quoted earlier when we caught up beforehand saying that this is a pivotal stage for the brand. You've just raised a 7-figure investment. Why is it pivotal right now?
I think right now is the time when people want change and people are looking for change. When we first started CanO Water, we would do trade shows and people would walk past and they would see our slogans and our brand, and they would just look at it with pure confusion and they didn't understand it. I remember being at an event where one of our taglines was "Water tastes better out of a can," and this guy just looked at us and just shook his head and thought that we were crazy. And Ariel, my business partner, looked at me and he was like, "I feel so I don't even know what to feel." And then we do an event now with like 10,000 people for like a marathon or something, and we're giving out cans and we're talking to people, and people are obsessed with the brand, and they're like, "Oh, I've got this at home," or "My kids are obsessed with this," or "They've got this at work. I love CanO Water." You know, in 6 years, we would never have been, even if we had £10 million 6 years ago, it wouldn't have been the right time to have pushed it. Now is the time, now is the time where people have seen the devastating impact of plastic bottles. Now is the time where people are actively looking for products that, that are authentic and that have derived from passion. So now is the time. Now is the time where we can really educate, and we've got a really innovative product that, why wouldn't you go from a plastic bottle to a can of water? That is the real question.
And in terms of when things go wrong, then looking at it, for instance, because you've done it in your own way and you've gone, right, this is how we're gonna do this, but it's gone tits up. How do you push yourself on, get yourself up and dust yourself down when things do fall down around you because you might have made a mistake, or just simply because the wind wasn't blowing hard enough?
I think for the first 4 years, I really was quite hard. I never did anything for me. It was always, it was 7,000% CanO Water, always, very, very little thinking about myself. Whereas when we, probably just before COVID, I had a bit of a burnout stage. I think we all did. And I started to sort of look a little bit at me. And I think that what I learned is that if I take a tiny step back, or even an hour a day to do, whether it's go to the gym or meditate or sort of just have a bit of me time, I will actually be a better person, a better operator, and I will work harder. So I think that that's something that, because things go wrong all the time and things go right all the time, and you take it very, very personally when it's your baby. And it's not like, it's not like it's someone else's business and it happens and you just go home and get over it. Someone has to deal with those things and someone has to process those things. And there have been times where we don't know for 24 hours or even 48 hours the fate of something. And I'm sitting there for 48 hours thinking, are we going to get out of this? And I think that that's just, that's the nature of building a business. And meditation and all these sort of little things, even if it's listening to a podcast, listening to podcasts helped me so much in the early days of CanO Water. Hearing enormous brands who I know and love be turned away by thousands of investors and people and get through it and go through the same things that we've gone through, that would really, really help me and keep me going. So there's all these different things that can help you process and move on. But ultimately, tomorrow's another day, and you've got to be on form.
And you mentioned about sort of waiting 48 hours to know if you're going to get out of this hole. What's an example then of, when shit really hit the fan and you managed to get out of that hole?
In our busiest summer, we basically had hundreds of thousands of cans being delivered to the UK for loads of new customers who were waiting. And, when you get a new customer, you've got to offer immaculate service, obviously. And we always have as a business. We always prided ourselves on really, really good service, always being on time, great quality. We sent out the cans. I got a call from one of the businesses that we'd sent the cans to, and they said, your water tastes a bit weird. And I called up my business partner. We basically drove at like 100 miles per hour to go to the warehouse to taste this water. We thought that it might have been one can. Anyway, all of the cans, hundreds of thousands of them, were filled with sparkling water. The steel cans were filled with sparkling water. So we had to recall those hundreds of thousands of cans. And I remember listening to the podcast in the early days about a really, really big brand that is owned by Coca-Cola that had glass in their product. They were glass bottle. They were a tea brand. They had glass bottles, and they had glass that was in like shards of glass in their brand. And I remember hearing about it and, you know, thinking, how on earth did these guys get out of that? I mean, that's deadly. You know, that's terrible. But, you know, they did. They worked around it. And I think that's what we did. You know, it's a prime example of, after probably sitting on the cans, on the pallets, crying for an hour about how we're going to get through this, you know, we worked it out and we got through it. And the team came up with a great plan and we did it. And it's examples like that where you get through it. And if we had just thought that's it, like in my old business, something like that would have happened and that would have been it. Whereas learning from failure and doing these things and, you know, listening to the podcast and, as I said, like, you know, working together as a team, you get through it and you become stronger.
In terms of obviously your burnout that you said you were going to have, or going through, I suppose, just before the pandemic, you know, mental health is a massive subject at the moment, something that a lot of people through the pandemic have gone through. New individuals obviously have become more identifiable with it because they're more aware of it. You know, have you ever suffered from mental health, be that burnout or otherwise, and how have you kind of coped with it?
Yeah, I think I've always been aware around mental health, always growing up. So it's not something that's new to me. It's something that's been with me for the majority of my life. So I've always been aware. As I said to you, I think it's incredibly important to look after yourself. It's so easy to work so hard and to enter this burnout that everyone talks about. It's so easy, and it will happen and you will feel it. And if you don't give yourself a little bit of time, it might be that it's like, you know, 2 hours a week. It may be that it is, you know, 10 minutes a day and you go on a walk, but it is so important that you give yourself you time. I'll encourage it to everyone that, you know, that comes and works in this office, because I would never want someone to work here that is going through that burnout and that, you know, that really not knowing what to do type of, you know, feeling. And I think that it is just take a bit of time out, whether it's, you know, for some people it's just seeing your family or speaking to someone on the phone and just reaching out to someone. But if you don't have that you time, when will you have that you time? And life goes so quick. And I didn't realize that after 4 years of not really having any me time, it just hit me out of nowhere. And ever since I've been sort of giving myself a bit of me time and, you know, doing things that make me feel a little bit at peace before going to war again, you know, it just helps me massively. And as I said, I just become a much better person.
So what's next then, Josh, for CanO Water? Can you diversify into sparkling water, or can you diversify into other avenues? You know, what's on the horizon?
Guess what? We have got sparkling water.
Boom. There you go.
So we have got sparkling water. We've got bigger cans. So I'll send you some cans over. But, you know, for us right now, it's doing everything that we've done, but better. You know, we've always been quite a creative team. We have organically grown. We haven't spent millions and millions of pounds on stuff. Everything that we've done really has been like this organic growth and has worked really, really well. So the things that have worked, we want to, you know, really sort of explode it. Really, that's the truth, and take it to the next level. And I think education is a massive part and a massive piece of the puzzle, because there's a lot of mixed messaging out there, and we just want to sort of display the facts and give people the choice. That's the truth, because we're not trying to replace plastic, because if people make that, if the retailer makes that decision, then they can make that decision. But we believe that consumers, there should be a choice for consumers, but because before CanO Water, you couldn't get anything other than a plastic bottle. So there should be a choice. And listen, aluminium is the best choice.
So what does success actually look like to you then?
Success is basically building a business that really makes a difference. That's the truth. You know, I want to look back in however many years and see that we created something that, as I said, was authentic and had purpose at the heart of it. I want to look back and see that the business that we built is offering people a choice and has, removed X amount of plastic out of the environment because it's changed people's mentality of not putting water in plastic bottles.
Before you go, we've actually, before the podcast started, loaded up your website, because on your website you've got a calculator that says, since you started looking at this page, X number of kilograms of plastic have been polluting our oceans. And as we finish the podcast, 988,700 and something, it's keeping going up, kilograms of plastic have polluted the ocean. So nearly 1 million kilograms of plastic during the duration of this podcast. That's pretty impressive, pretty poignant, pretty powerful statement, that.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary, isn't it? And it's the reason we get up every day in the morning and build this brand, because it's not slowing down. If not, it's getting bigger. And I think for us, it's, if everyone defied the norm a little bit more, and if everyone sort of went out there to do good, which I think that a lot more people are in the world, I think that, we can make a difference. And I think that it's really important that, when you look at those crazy statistics, that we see that is the reality, and we need to make change for sure.
And if we want to join you on making change with you guys, how can we buy CanO Water? Where can we find it? How can we get involved?
So you can buy CanO Water from most major retailers across the country. So people like Tesco, Morrison's, WH Smith, Waitrose, Holland and Barrett. I mean, you can find it on a website. But yeah, most major retailers. And if you want to go online, Amazon's probably your best bet.
I love it. Josh, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thanks for listening. Coming up next week.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Gosh, I've been in tears, I've been suicidal. Last year was a really tough year for me as far as doing the business and things. I fell ill as well, so I'd have a major operation. And that puts everything into context, that we're not here for long. Might sound a bit sadistic, but I think you should be looking forward to Monday and disappointed it's Friday and you haven't done as much.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. See you next week, 8 a.m. on all podcast platforms. Simply subscribe or ask your smart speaker to play Success is in the Mind podcast. This is a Pinpoint Media podcast presented by me, Oliver Bruce, produced by Dan Miller and Fergus Bruce, edited and designed by Harry Fox and Victoria Bramwell, filmed by Madeline Harris, marketed by Ellie Hanwell and Rachel Buchanan Hughes, and managed by Bethan Wyatt and Annabelle Lawton-Smith. Quite a team. Thanks, guys. If you know anyone you think we should interview, if you want to tell your story or have your say, please reach out to me directly via podcast@pinpoint-media.co.uk. Remember, there's never a good time to start a business, but in business, you should always have a good time. Cheers, guys.